The Latin says, roughly, thanks to the great generosity of Cecil Rhodes. But others disagree. Rhodes delenda est, sed a maioribus stultum est multis destruora aedificata. Rhodes was a 19th century imperialist who made a mint in South Africa. Some students want this symbol of racial supremacy to be cast down.
I don't think that a statue which symbolises racial violence and racial apartheid should be adorning any academic institution, or indeed any institution that considers itself to be progressive. What is done with it, I don't really care, but I don't think that such a symbol should be part of an academic institution.
Today we learned that Oriel College, Oxford, has decided that Rhodes is staying. The problem is, if you start with smashing this statue, where do you stop? What about the brace of kings and the mixed bag of bishops hanging out with Rhodes? The 21st century isn't big on statues, but it does do legacy. The Said Business School here at the University of Oxford is evidence, some say, of the amazing generosity of a billionaire benefactor. Proof, according to others, that the facilitator of arms deals is worried about his immortal soul. It's not just rich men like Wathiq Said who've been buying up chunks of our universities. An imperial power is at it too, but it's not Britain. China is paying to get its Confucius institutes into our academia. The LSE has received £860,000 from the Chinese state. And that's not all. It turns out they fund 29 Confucius centres across the country in universities like Cardiff, Edinburgh and Manchester, totting up to a rough total of £4 million a year. Smashing up statues of people you don't like has always been good fun. It's how the present gets its revenge on the past. The danger is that if you clean up history too much, you may end up forgetting it.
John Sweeney there. With me now, two historians, David Olusoga and Tom Holland. I would like to sort of generalise this a little bit beyond just Cecil Rhodes. And David, is deep down a concern you have that there is a kind of a tendency in Britain and maybe other parts of the West to whitewash some of the kind of awful things that we did in the past, and that's what this debate is really about?
I think the debate's got to the heart of the fact that these statues aren't very good at telling us history. They tell us a very simple, one-sided, celebratory history. The image that Cecil Rhodes that is presented by this statue is of his great works. He was undoubtedly a philanthropist. He undoubtedly gave a lot of money that's done a lot of good. But there is another side to the ledger, and statues don't give us that. They're not very good tools for history.
Right. But it is just a statue. Can I come back, though, to the more general question, though? Do you think there's a problem with whitewashing of colonial past, or not?
I think we've struggled in this country to look holistically at the colonial past. I think some people want to claim that everything Britain did abroad was terrible, that there's never been a British person until the invention of the package tour who ever had a nice word to say to a foreigner. And then there are people who convince themselves, and I think completely erroneously, that the empire was some enormous act of outdoor relief, some great global charity, that Britain abandoned the poor of Britain, spent its wealth and its treasure going around the world, worrying about whether India would have a railway in the future and if the Chinese would have Shakespeare. The empire was run for profit. When it encountered resistance, it was absolutely brutal.
Right. Where do you think we are on empire, Tom? Because I'm just slightly feeling a lot of this Rhodes debate, and you heard it in the clip in the package, is really about attitudes to
yes, and I think that what the debate on Rhodes demonstrates is that attitudes to empire are deeply ambivalent and deeply divided, and essentially there is a huge conflict of interest in this. But I don't actually think that the people who are supporting the retention of the Rhodes statue really care very much about Rhodes himself. I don't think that's what's at stake. I think it reflects a sense that people have of how we in this country have traditionally done history. We are not like the French. We are not like the Russians. We do not go around toppling statues, and that is because we have a slightly Whiggish attitude to our history, that our constitution and our liberties and our rights have evolved gradually over time, and so therefore...
You took one down of Jimmy Savile in Glasgow, interestingly, and I didn't hear a whimper of discontent at that being removed.
Maybe Jimmy Savile is the exception that proves the rule. Fascinatingly, also in Oxford, there was a memorial to Field Marshal Haig at Brasenose, which was put up and then got sort of discreetly removed. So it does happen. But equally, what you also have in Oxford in the examination rooms is a picture of the Kaiser. So often, with these statues, with these memorials, it's as though you're looking at fossils in a great wall of sedimentary rock, and you can use them to trace the evolution of our history. And I think that's actually part of the fascination of it. That we have Rhodes in Oxford, but we also have the young Mandela in the South Bank Centre, and we have the elder statesman Mandela in Parliament Square.
Okay. I think that's one tradition. I think that's entirely an apposite thing to say. But Britain has another tradition. In many areas, Britain has two traditions, the domestic and the colonial. In the colonial tradition, Britain has gone around the world and destroyed thousands of statues. We went into Africa, the missionaries destroyed the temples, the statues, the idols of indigenous people. In the 1860s, we went into China and we destroyed the Summer Palace, one of the great jewels of Manchu China. 30 years later, we went into the Kingdom of Benin and destroyed the palace, all of the reliefs, all of the bronzes of the Benin Kingdom. We have another great sideline, which is pinching statues. We're half a mile from the British Library, the British Museum, which is full of statues
that we've appropriated. To get moral clarity on this
issue.
I
think this idea that statues are somehow uniquely sacrosanct and inviolable for the British, I think that might be true in the domestic sense.
Within Britain.
But the point is that Rhodes's career wasn't in Britain. It was in Africa, and in that colonial tradition, we have been extremely destructive.
Can I ask this? Because this is, in a way, gets to the heart of a debate about other things like the way the language is sexist or other symbols, is should we focus as much as we do, for modern causes, on symbols, on changing symbols, like statues or words or policing language? I mean, just briefly, David, on symbols.
I think they can be extremely important. I think there's a risk that's happening in some university campuses, this idea of deplatforming, that no debate, no disagreement, no idea that you don't like should be presented to you. You should live in this safe space where you never encounter
You're not in
favour
favour of that?
I'm very much opposed to that, but I don't think that that's what this debate's about.
Do you think we go too far?
Well, as John Smith said in his report, it is quite fun to pull down a statue. And in a sense, it serves to focus what are often very complex and difficult issues. And we live in an age where an effective hashtag can generate an entire campaign. And I'm sure that the role of social media, the ability of people to harness campaigns, is having an impact on the way in which certain symbols are acting as lightning rods.
But if I could take issue with John Sweeney's report, no one in this campaign is talking about toppling or destroying statues. This is not iconoclasm. They're not just talking about destroying the statue. India's got a great solution. Above Delhi on the Durbar Plain are all the old statues that used to be littered around colonial Delhi, and they're all jumbled together in a park. None of them have been destroyed. Last time I was there, there was a family of storks nesting quite happily on Queen Victoria's lap. I think there's lots of ways of diffusing these statues without destroying them.
Indeed, but another way is to accept that they are a part of our history and should stay there. I mean, I think the most striking example of this is at Whitehall. One end you have a statue of Charles I, at the other end you have a statue of Oliver Cromwell, and that actually seems to me a wonderful way of sorting out the problems. Give space for both.
You, I think, at the time said maybe just a bigger plaque explaining some of the context.
Well,
of the history.
I want more history, not less
more
history.
history.
I would like the statue to be contextualised. I'd like the other side of Rhodes's career.
Which seems to be more or less what they're saying they're actually going to do.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks both very much indeed. I dare say we'll still be arguing about this in a year's time.